It's night. No lights. No locks. No walls. Just you, a fire that's dying faster than you'd like, and something moving in the dark that is absolutely 100% bigger than you. Think about that for a second. Right now, your biggest predator problem is whether the Wi-Fi router needs a reboot. 200,000 years ago, your biggest predator problem was a cave hyena the size of a modern lion, and it already knew where you slept. Here's the thought that had to cross an early human's mind at some point, probably while crouched behind a rock, heart pounding. I am not the strongest thing out here. I am not the fastest thing out here. So how, exactly, am I still alive tomorrow? That question, asked by a small, slow, clawless primate surrounded by animals built to kill it, is the actual subject of this video. Not spears. Not saber-toothed cats, though we'll get there. The real subject is this: humans were prey animals for most of our existence. And the story of how we stopped being prey is one of the strangest survival stories on the planet. Stick around, because the twist at the end of this one is going to sit with you a lot longer than the average YouTube fact. So let's start with the receipts, because this isn't speculation, it's written on bone. At Swartkrans Cave in South Africa, researchers examining early hominin fossils found something unsettling. Punctures in a skull that matched, almost perfectly, the spacing of a leopard's canine teeth. Not a weapon. Not a rock. Teeth. This wasn't an isolated case, either. The site has produced multiple hominin remains showing predator damage consistent with big cats dragging prey into trees to eat, the way leopards still do today. In plain English, for a chunk of our evolutionary history, we weren't hunting the big cats of Africa. We were their lunch. And here's where it gets interesting: this isn't just one weird cave. Fossil evidence from multiple early hominin sites across Africa shows similar patterns of carnivore damage, suggesting predation on our ancestors wasn't rare. It was routine, regular, expected. So the mighty ancient hunter image you've got in your head? Delete it. Replace it with something smaller, twitchier, and constantly checking over its shoulder. Here's the part that should genuinely mess with your head. Your body still remembers this. That jolt of fear you feel when something rustles in tall grass at night? That's not random. That's ancient hardware. Humans, like a lot of primates, are wired with an enhanced startle response to sudden movement, especially at the edges of vision, in low light, near tall grass or brush. Exactly the conditions a stalking predator would use. Even something as basic as our eyes points forward, not sideways like a rabbit's, giving us better depth perception for tools and tracking, but worse peripheral awareness, which is probably why humans get uniquely spooked by things approaching from the side. But here's the thing nobody tells you. Fear of the dark isn't a personality quirk. It's a leftover survival setting. For nearly all of human evolutionary history, darkness meant reduced visibility against animals that could see, smell, and hear far better than we could. Kids who are scared of the dark aren't being irrational. They're running software that kept their ancestors alive. Now let's talk about the moment humans stopped just reacting to predators and started deliberately engineering them out of the picture. At Wonderwork Cave, also in South Africa, archaeologists found burned bone and ash deep inside the cave, in a layer dated to roughly 1 million years ago, some of the oldest solid evidence anywhere for the controlled use of fire by early humans. Not lightning strike wildfire. Controlled. Maintained. Inside a shelter. Here's the plain English version. Fire wasn't primarily about cooking dinner in this era. Fire was a predator deterrent, a light source, and a tool for controlling a cave entrance. A hyena doesn't care how clever you are. A hyena does care about fire. But here's where it gets interesting: fire alone wasn't enough. At a site called Schöningen in Germany, archaeologists recovered wooden spears roughly 300,000 years old, expertly balanced and fire-hardened at the tip. This wasn't a sharpened stick grabbed in a panic. This was engineering, weight distribution, design. Translation: at some point, humans stopped being purely reactive prey and started building deliberate, repeatable predator defense technology. That's not a small shift. That's the beginning of everything. Now, here's where we have to be careful, because it's tempting to assume Wonderwork and Schöningen mark the actual beginning of human predator defense. They almost certainly don't. Fire leaves ash. Ash can survive for 1 million years in the right cave. But early defense strategies, thorn barriers, shouted alarms, watching in shifts, Throwing rocks, those leave nothing. No fossil. No layer. No trace. Wood rots. Skin decays. A pile of branches dragged around a sleeping group doesn't survive 100,000 years, let alone 1,000,000. So when we say the earliest evidence is a burned layer in a South African cave, what we really mean is the earliest evidence that happened to survive. This isn't a dead end. It's a genuine mystery. Somewhere in the deep, undocumented past, there were defensive behaviors that never made it into the fossil record at all. We're not looking at the whole story here. We're looking at the parts of the story that happen to be fireproof. For centuries, one particular ancient claim about predators got treated as pure exaggeration, the kind of thing storytellers add to make the wilderness sound scarier than it was. Ancient and medieval writers across Europe and Asia described predators far larger and more dangerous than anything living in their regions at the time. Enormous cats, oversized bears, wolves that hunted in numbers no modern pack matched. For a long time, this got filed under folklore, exaggeration, campfire talk. Then paleontology caught up. The fossil record confirmed the existence of animals like the cave bear and the cave lion, genuinely massive predators that coexisted with early humans across Ice Age Europe, only going extinct within the last several thousand years, well within range of human oral memory. Here's the honest answer. Those exaggerated, ancient monster stories weren't fantasy. They were memory, filtered through generations of storytelling, describing animals that were real, terrifying, and only recently gone. Sometimes the folklore is just history that hasn't been believed yet. Here's the thing that turns this from a cool fact into an actual pattern. This wasn't a one-region problem with a one-region solution. It happened everywhere independently. In East Asia, the site of Zhoukoudian near Beijing, sometimes called Dragon Bone Hill, preserved evidence of early human occupation alongside remains showing predator activity from large carnivores that also used the cave, including hyenas. Different continent, same standoff. Humans and apex predators competing over the same shelter. Meanwhile, across parts of East Africa, traditional pastoralist communities like the Maasai independently developed the Nkong, a thorn branch enclosure built specifically to protect people and livestock from lions overnight. No blueprint shared across continents. No ancient internet. Just the same problem solved with the same basic logic by unrelated groups thousands of miles and thousands of years apart. That's the real takeaway here. Fire circles in South Africa. Thorn barriers in East Africa. Cave standoffs in China. This wasn't a fluke that happened once. It was a universal human pattern because if you don't solve the predator problem, you don't get to become a species with a lot of extended family and a to-do list. So let's get cold and practical for a second, because none of this was about bravery. It was about math. A single human is slow, weak-clawed, and has terrible night vision compared to almost anything trying to eat it. But humans figured out something predators hadn't. Cooperation scales. A group that sleeps in shifts, keeps a fire lit, and reacts as a coordinated unit is a dramatically worse target than a lone, sleeping individual. Group living wasn't primarily social comfort, it was predator math. More eyes watching the tree line. More voices to shout an alarm. More bodies to make a threat display look bigger than any single human actually is. Fire added a second layer. Light disrupts a nocturnal predator's biggest advantage, which is seeing in the dark better than you can. And weapons like those fire-hardened spears from Skaaningen added a third layer, the ability to fight back at a distance instead of relying purely on flight. Layer these together, group, fire, weapon, and you've built the ancient equivalent of a security system. Not glamorous, just brutally effective. Here's the uncomfortable part, though. That entire defensive relationship, humans and predators locked in a careful, respectful standoff, didn't stay a standoff. Once humans stopped being primarily prey and started having surplus time, surplus tools, and surplus confidence, the relationship flipped hard. The same animals that once had to be feared and defended against became targets for systematic extermination. European cave bears and cave lions vanished within a window that overlaps with expanding human populations and improving weapons. Centuries later, wolves, lions, and big cats across multiple continents were hunted not for defense, but for sport, for bounty, for the simple fact that a dangerous animal had become a trophy instead of a threat. The species that once built fire circles just to survive the night eventually built entire industries around wiping out the very animals it used to fear. That's not a footnote. That's one of the more uncomfortable pivots in our relationship with the natural world, from defense to dominance to near eradication, in a fraction of the time it took to get good at surviving in the first place. So here's what we actually know. Early humans were, for a long stretch of our history, genuine prey. Leopards, hyenas, and cats far bigger than anything roaming today's Africa treated us as a food source, not a threat. And the tools that got us out of that position, fire, weapons, group cooperation, weren't about conquering nature. They were about surviving one more night. Here's the reframe worth sitting with. Humanity's entire rise didn't start with dominance. It started with defense. Think back. Swartkrans and those leopard-matched puncture marks. Wonderwork and that million-year-old ash layer. The sconning and spears, fire-hardened and perfectly balanced. The Maasai Kong, built on the same logic as a cave fire, just with thorns instead of flame. Different tools, same fight. And you, right now, tonight, when you flick on a light in a dark room without even thinking about it, you are doing the exact same thing a human did outside a cave a million years ago. You're just not aware you're still doing it. We didn't start at the top of the food chain. We fought our way there, one fire, one spear, one long, watchful night at a time.